During our week of filming at the Continuing Challenge in Sacramento, the Lithium-Ion Battery presentation was a standing room only event. It's a long video for sure, but every part of the presentation gets you thinking and taking notes. You'll be bringing many ideas back to your team. After watching the video, be sure to download some of the great materials Robert and Bobby have compiled to help get a handle on lithium-ion battery fire response.
It's good. Welcome. So this presentation that we're going to provide you in building an airplane while we fly it is kind of a combination of a couple of presentations that Bobby and I put together. Typically, when we do teach these, it's like a 4-hour class. We usually have the opportunity to blow up some batteries and things like that. Obviously, we don't have the time for that here. Anyways, we're going to try to squeeze a lot of information in as much as we can. But I think the key here is that it's an open forum for you to be able to ask questions or whatever scenarios in your mind that you want to run through. The what if this happens, then what? And we can have a good, solid conversation about that. But how many people came here for answers? Yeah, I guarantee you're going to leave with more questions than answers. Right? So I'm Rob Rezende. I'm with San Diego City Fire. I'm the HazMat program manager over there. And if you didn't catch the opening ceremonies, I've been, whether I like it or not, thrown into the world of lithium-ion batteries for the last several years, mostly because of him. And so, I've been really dived in really heavily and developed a bunch of different things for our department and for our city moving forward. And I'm happy to have those conversations with anybody later. I'm also going to share with you my Google Doc drive that I have that is available for all of you. The PowerPoint presentations on there, there's videos, there's the PSAs that we put together for the city. There are tactical worksheets, there's all kinds of stuff on there. It may or may not be helpful. It's all in editable format because we all know HazMat personnel do the best R&D in the world, right? Rip off and duplicate. Right? So that's what it's there for. It's for you to do that because probably 50% of the stuff that's in there is something that I R&D from those guys. So,
yeah, my name is Bobby Salvesen. Obviously, with my accent, I'm not from around here. I'm New York City Fire for 25 years. I just got out like 9 months ago with the original hardware. I was in HazMat 1 for a while, and towards the end of the career, and the tail end of a mediocre career, we went from doing tons of saddle tanks of gasoline and diesel to batteries. And I'm sure you've seen this on the news, but like it went from 80% of diesel and that kind of stuff to 80% of batteries. To the point where we were, a cozy little HazMat company in New York City doing 600 runs a year to now they're doing 2,500 runs a year, and 80% of that is batteries. So we're building the reps, and so what I'm going to sprinkle in here is a lot of what we're currently doing in order to do these things. We went through an evolution. I'm a big fan of like a smart man learns from his mistakes, but a wise man learns from other people's mistakes. So I'll tell you where the bodies are buried, things that we were doing that is not a good idea, that we got blown up on. A couple of times guys got hurt, and so I'll tell you, don't do that stuff. And I'll tell you other stuff. I don't sell for anybody. I don't care if you buy a product or not. I'm gonna give you the straight poop on what's out there and what's currently working and not working. So I'll fold in every once in a while.
So let's talk about what we are here to do. We're here to do first safety, right? To increase the responder safety, that's the goal for us. To do risk assessment, to increase your situational awareness, sharing some of the current stuff that Bobby and I have put together, some of our what we call best practices, and I put best practices in quotes because there really isn't best practices, they're just practices that haven't failed yet.
We're going to share a ton of stuff at the end. The most common thing we get called is, hey, can you share the SOG or SOP, whatever the department uses, for this or that? And I'll give you everything. At the end, I'll give you all the FD-wise documentation. The problem is, this was true 6 months ago, but it's starting to firm up, is that as soon as the ink dries on that paper, it's changed. Like that's why we say we're building the planes we fly, because it's evolving so fast. I will say that the techniques of mitigation are starting to firm up, but that leads us into a completely different questions and problems that now we're encountering. So that's kind of where we're going to focus most on.
And then the company level operational dialogue, to me, that's one of the top things is you all take the information back and have that kitchen table conversation, that office table conversation. What do we do when we go on this scenario? And hopefully you guys are bringing a lot of information, educated information that you can share with your crew. But having those discussions with the group that you work with before you actually show up on that incident is kind of the key thing. And this is like a lot of planting of a lot of seeds in your brains to take back to then start really getting into the weeds, right? And so that's kind of the goal of this. What we're not here to do is we're not going to go into the politics of it. We're not really going to discuss, is it worth doing what we're doing, because that's not our job. And we're just basically building the plan as we fly. We do not have all the answers by any means necessary. Nobody does. Anybody who stands in front of you and claims to be a subject matter expert on this topic is selling something. Okay, because nobody truly is a subject matter expert on this. And I talk to guys that build batteries and they will tell you, yeah, I don't know what happens when you catch fire. Or I don't know what happens when you put a bullet through it, right? So it's not, and even the guys that are building the technology don't really know all the end state consequences.
So NYPD bought a whole bunch of EV cars because they're going green, right? It's a good idea. But when you're a cop, and I know most of you guys are not cops, what do you want in front of you when there's a shootout? Nice stout engine. And now you got like a styrofoam cup in the front of the thing. And you're taking fire, and you're like, this wasn't a good idea. This is not a good idea. So they're clearly reevaluating, and you're literally sitting on a bomb, right? Because these bullets are going into the car and hitting the batteries, and you're sitting on them. So again, just planting seeds.
So we'll get going at the really rudimentary level, like what are the types of batteries that are out there and what are we actually talking about, right? So you have the alkaline battery. That's your grandfather's AA. It's the workhorse forever since the 1800s has been the battery that we've used. Funny enough, they're starting to make energy storage systems out of alkaline batteries now, which is interesting. You have lithium metal batteries. Can you tell these two apart if they're sitting on a desk somewhere? Not really. Right? Is there a difference between the two? Yeah, 100%, right? Alkaline batteries have a goop in the middle of them, non-energetic. You can throw them in fire, you can cut them open. Nothing's going to happen to those batteries. Lithium metal batteries have a lithium metal inside of them wrapped around, and that lithium metal is extremely water reactive. We actually have a lot of homeless folks in San Diego. Do that, and they cut open the lithium metal batteries because I don't know if you've ever taken any classes on how to make meth, but there's a one-pot method that you can use lithium metal to heat up your solution in the liquid to create meth. And so they package the stuff and they save this stuff for later. They put it in little containers and they save it for later for use. And now they're trying to do that with lithium-ion batteries. And just so this is one of the things that I like to make sure everybody gets clear, that lithium-ion does not have lithium metal in it. Lithium-ion is the elemental lithium that's inside there, not lithium metal. So they're different, they behave differently. And our folks are finding out when they cut a lithium-ion battery open, and they call us because they blew up the hand, it's a different product.
The lithium-ion battery, like, so I'm cutting to the chase, but he just reminded me of it, like the homelessness. So we were putting batteries out on street corners for them to be picked up by sanitation, whoever was picking them up. And so we started going, oh, they're getting picked up. They weren't getting picked up. The locals were picking them up, and then they were making like one pots just like that, which we'll do in the parking lot if you guys are into it. We'll go right after class, we'll just do a couple one pots if we want. It's on the house, that's what makes it. I'm a giver.
So then you move to the secondary type of batteries, which are the rechargeable types, and we've had these around forever, right? So the lead acid batteries, and if you read the instructions on the lead acid battery, it'll tell you not to charge it in a confined space because it may produce hydrogen gas. And then you have the nickel cadmium, and these are the ones that we used to put in like RC cars, you know, and you charge them for like 12 hours and you get like 15 minutes of fun out of them. Like, that's these, right? So there's a reason that these are not as popular as lithium-ion, because lithium-ion holds charge and it's way better at doing those kinds of things, right? You get way more life out of these batteries. Yeah. So let's talk about the different types of batteries that you're going to encounter. The cylindrical cell battery, that is the most popular cell type of battery. You can see those in about 90% of all the micromobility You're going to see them in vehicles. You're going to see them in energy storage walls. The cylindrical cell battery, the original one is this 18650 that is still the most common and the most popular to be used on all types of devices. It's about the size of a shotgun shell or a large C-cell battery, if you haven't seen them.
I will guarantee there's probably 200 of those in this room right now. If you have a cell phone charger, you have one, at least one. If it's a couple wide, you can say there's 1, 2, 3, 4 in there. I'm gonna bet everybody has one on them right now.
The prismatic cell is kind of like a mini suitcase, and they come in different sizes. I've seen them 75 pounds to handheld sizes. And the prismatic cell is a little unique in many ways, and they're kind of the top right now, starting to be the top choice for energy storage systems because they get to be heavier. And we're starting to see that the heavier the chemistry of the battery, the more stable the battery, and the lighter the chemistry of the battery, the more unstable. So it's one of the reasons why micromobility and e-scooters and e-bikes are a huge problem because they have to be light, right? You can't put maybe you can, I shouldn't say that because these guys can do whatever. But lithium ferrous phosphate, lithium iron phosphate is a heavy battery because it's got iron in it. It's also one of the more stable chemistries of the batteries, which we find in energy storage systems. That 75-pound one that I told you was a lithium ferrous phosphate of a manufacturer in San Diego that's building them out of that. Much more stable technology and chemistry. The pouch cell is the one that we for sure have at least 200 of them here. It's your cell phone, your iWatch, your laptop. That's your pouch cell batteries. Those, when they fail, they blow up like a little balloon, and then they can explode on you. I talk to these manufacturers and they're like, oh, our product's great, like 99.9% of the time it's safe. And then I point to guys that are wearing these uniforms right here and say, well, the reason that all of us exist in this room is, and the reason we have jobs is because we live in that 0.1%. Our 0.1% is 100% of what we do, right? So when somebody says something is perfectly safe, yeah, until it's not, and that's when we show up, right? So we need to know the 100% of the time we're going to be living in the failure point of these things, right? So this is so another cylindrical cell. This is starting to be more popular for the vehicles. This Tesla is one that designed this one. It's 2170. It's there's thousands of them in electric vehicles. The pouch cell, GM and Nissan use the pouch cell technology for their vehicles. So you're going to find different types of batteries in different vehicles as well. We're going to talk about those in more detail later. This is the progression of the cylindrical cell, right? So we're starting to go to this 4680, which is it's like a large beer can.
It's like a Coke can, like the 8-ounce ones, you know? It's quite large.
Yeah, and so what does that mean to us, right? All of these things, the size, exponential capacity to store energy, that's what we need to be thinking about. The stranded energy that's left behind from a catastrophic event. The stored energy that's left behind. How much power does this thing have? And what is the potential? If you think about like an F-150 Lightning, it can power your house for 3 days. When it fails, it's all that power leaving right now, right? To just conceptualize that, right? It's a lot of energy.
Dude, so the 1865, which is just dimensions, versus the 2170, going from the 65 millimeters to the 70 plus 5 millimeters, and 18 to 21 plus 3 millimeters is a significant amount of energy that it holds. You're sitting there going, wait a second, it went up by 3, by 5, what's the big deal? This goes back to Proby school. Like when you said to the new guy, you say, if I have a 2.5-inch hose and I have a 5-inch hose, how many 2.5s fit in a 5? And he's like, carry the 2, right? Actually, if you think about it, it's that pi r squared, so it's an exponential. There's 6 1/4 2.5s in a 5-inch. So by me just jumping up those couple of millimeters, we're talking about significant more energy density. Then you go to that guy, the 4680, that's a stunning amount. We're talking about like, we went from milliwatt hours to complete watt hours. It's a ton more energy. And now they're putting these things in great quantities into the tractor. The one on the right is the one for the tractor trailers, the Cybertruck. What is the other one he's selling? The Tesla truck, the tractor trailers, that's all 4680s. So we're talking about like cans of these things.
Just go over it briefly on how, really brief. I know I got a lot of smart people, chemists and HazMaters in the room, so we're not going to go into full detail, just going to cover the brief of how a battery works. You have lithium, elemental lithium, standing on the side when it's charged, and when you plug something in, like your engine or your cell phone, the electrons leave lithium because lithium likes to give off its electron. And because there is that gradient change, the lithium wants to migrate to this side of the battery. It goes through this separator.
Which only lets through lithium and not the electron. That's why it's forced.
The separator is so thin, it only allows the lithium element to go through. It lives in this graphite mesh on this side, completely decharged. Now you plug it in, you start charging it, you basically reverse that whole process. You start to push the electron to this side of the battery. It's sitting here on whatever that chemistry that whoever designed it to do. It could be nickel, cadmium, it could be manganese, cobalt, all different types of chemistry that are holding that lithium into the charged position. The key to the safety of this operation is this separator in the middle. One of the reasons we see these things fail is because that separator in the middle is built differently by different manufacturers. And so you have different tiers of batteries, like the tier 1 batteries are all your high-end Panasonic, Sony, LG, Tesla, right? The folks that have a lot of money, they go in through, and then when they buy products from a mine, they are actually inspecting the mine. Is the mine really giving me pure products, right? So they have the ability to do that research. And so they're getting the highest quality product possible. They're making the highest quality separator possible. Those are your tier 1s. Your tier 2s, a step down. They don't have as much money, so they might go into the broader market and just getting materials wherever they can to manufacture their batteries. So they don't have as much quality control checks. And so their product is just slightly lower quality. Those are the things that you will see. The tier 1s and the tier 2s are the ones that are allowed to be used in the United States, and the tier 3 are not. In like electric vehicles and energy storage systems. The tier 3s are the ones that are being built by somebody at home or in a garage or in a sweatshop or something like that. And those batteries have no quality control whatsoever. And that's where you're starting to see a lot of these. Those are the ones that are in the micromobility. Those are the ones you can buy online.
And just remember, it's a anode cathode with a separator, right? And they just take that and they just wrap it around a cylinder, so they have a bunch of that stuff. And as I want, like, you remember like 15 years ago, you had a rigid drill and it had like a battery pack that was like a car battery, and now you can get it and it's really small. Well, with shrinking of the size and us taking more power and shrinking it to a smaller part, all the separation parts start getting down to the atomic level. And so when you have a battery now and it gets insulted, which is anything, we'll talk about that later on, but I can physically insult it. I can smash it on the corner of this table and I can have it go on fire. So as stupid as, like, me and you were gonna have a fight 10 years ago, right? You'd bring the knife, I'd bring the brass knuckles, we'd scrap it up and then we'd be done. But today, this is unbelievable to say this, is that they come with hammers. And you're like, well, I'm not gonna hit it with a hammer, that's crazy. They're not for the hammer. We're gonna swing and we'll do our thing. And then I take my hammer and I smash the battery in your bike. Because they know you're gonna either go to work or home, and you bring your insulted bike to work or home and it'll light your house on fire. That's where the kids are today. Right, so that's a long-term burn. In a fire service, we'll do the long joke. That's a really long joke. That's crazy. So that's what they're doing now. They're insulting batteries on purpose to cause destruction.
So before we get to the chemistry and the explosion and all those toxicity concerns, there is one other aspect of these batteries that often gets overlooked, which is the electrical hazard that we find in these batteries, right? So I made this chart just to kind of give you an idea of how much voltage is in a cell phone and in an e-bike and a scooter and in a F-150 Lightning. And my litmus test, because in HazMat I always have a litmus test, like, you know, if it's, how flammable is it? And I compare it to gasoline or diesel. Like, those are my litmus tests, right? Like, how poisonous is it? Well, I compared it to cyanide, right? So those are like my things, my stabilizers. And so the trolley in San Diego, the subway in New York City, runs on 600 volts. I've seen people get blasted by the 600 volts, right? Not a pretty sight.
Oh yeah,
right? And so to me, to have the respect that I need to have on these incidents is the fact that a Ford Mach-E has 450 volts in it running through. That's a lot of electrical power. Right, so that has to be the first thought that we have on these incidents. First is the electrical hazard, right? Because that's the first thing that's definitely going to come out the engine. And then you can see the Tesla Semi is going to get 1,000 volts in it. So a significant amount of juice in there. So why are we talking about it in 2023? Why is everybody in this room today here in 2023? These batteries were designed in the 90s. First one came out in like 1993. So why are we talking about it? Why are you guys concerned about it today? It's everywhere. It's in cars and anything. Yeah, it's everywhere, right? And how have we gotten here so fast? Well, we injected meth into the system. Right? That's what we did. We put a ton of money into moving us in this direction, and like we always talk about the three-legged stool, right? You can have quality, you can have speed, and you can have price. And you can really only have two, right? So if you have to make it cheaper, then you gotta sacrifice quality, right? Or speed. If you want it to be cheap and fast, which it sounds like that's exactly what we want, what are we sacrificing? Quality, right? And so we had these things coming onto the market, and now we just like I said, injected meth into it. Now we have these things being mass produced. You have people coming out of the woodwork to take part of this market now, right? This is a $1 trillion market, right? So you got everybody coming out of the woodwork, people that don't even belong in this type of stuff. Manufacturing things, tack welding batteries together at home and selling them on Amazon, right, to make money. That's what's happening out there. There's a black market of batteries out there, right? And so that is, of course, now, because it's available, because it's everywhere, now it's cheaper for the average consumer to purchase, which means now we purchase more of it, right? 5 years ago, how many people here have an e-scooter or an e-bike? It's okay, you're not gonna swear, right? So we got like 20 people in the room that have e-scooters or e-bikes. If I was asked that question 5 years ago, I think there'd be 0 people with those hands up, maybe 1. Why are they more prevalent? They're cheaper. More of us can afford it, right? More of us can afford it, more of us are gonna buy it. So we start buying for our kids, we start buying for Christmas and all those things. So they're everywhere. They're starting to pop up everywhere. And then it's just a game of numbers, right? Even if we had a perfect 99% manufacturing, super high-end quality manufacturing capability, 1% of the 10 billion batteries that are being produced are going to be bad batteries. Well, 1% of 10 billion is a lot. I'm not going to do the math. 1% of 10 billion is a lot, right? And those are getting placed in different manufactured devices. So it's just a matter of time at this point, even just from manufacturing defects that they're going to fail, let alone all the insulting that we do on them on a regular basis.
I will say that what we're seeing a lot of is ancillary businesses that pop up around this. We've had multiple fatalities in high rises because what a new thing is, this is like one of those pop-up businesses that happens, is that, you know, in my project, your battery goes bad, so I buy it from you for 20 bucks. And then I resolder a couple cells in there and I sell it to you for 100 bucks. But I don't just do it for these two guys, I do it for the whole neighborhood. So we had one, it was four or five fatalities on the apartment. 2 guys that were actually doing it slid the gas pole on the outside of the thing, like 70-something feet. I would have never done that shit, that's crazy. But they slid the pole on the outside because they were doing so many batteries. There was 14,000 cells inside this one apartment. Like, that's a cell, like one of those little batteries, that's one cell. 14,000 of them in there. They had this whole business going. And so we're seeing pop-up industries coming around these things that are now problems. Like, I have some pictures of like San Francisco. Anybody San Francisco? All right, San Francisco, we were doing a class in San Francisco. I ran out of cells, walked around the block to the e-bike store. And I told them I need some cells. And they were like, well, we're not giving, you know, we don't have, I'm like, come on. So the fire department, so they're like, okay. The guy came out with a freaking shopping cart. Just 2,000 or 3,000 cells. He's like, take all you want. So it's full on my shirt. Right? But that's in your area. I took pictures of how many charges in that room, and it was, you can imagine, like, there's only, like, let's say in the back room of the place, 10 outlets, but he's charging 200. So how does he do that? He plugs in a strip. Well, that's not enough, so what does he do? Plugs in a strip to the strip. And then you got Clark Griswold's, you know, Christmas tree there with 6,000 strips there. Are they all getting charged at the right rate? No. And then now we enter.
So a lot of money is invested in this, right? So even in these chargers, so 7.5 billion in just putting these chargers throughout our nation's infrastructure. What are some of the things you see just from this picture? What are some of the things that concern you about those chargers? And these chargers are not lithium-ion battery, right? They're just there to charge electric vehicles. But what are some of the things just right now from looking at the pictures you're worried about? No protection around it. Yeah, there's no stanchions. There's nothing, right? So grandma's going to put her foot through put it in drive and drive over the thing, right? What happens at that point? Is the car charged? When you show up, do you go just right there, grab the door, open the door to check on grandma? Right? How do you know if it's charged? I mean, I talked to the guys that built this, they're like, oh no, we got safety mechanisms that will shut it off. Anybody here ever been on a place that supposedly had a safety mechanism not working? It goes back to that thing I said before, like we live in the 100% of the time when things don't do what they're supposed to do. Right? So, safety mechanism doesn't work. Do you know how to shut these off remotely? Do you know where these are in your neighborhoods? Have you gone around and looked at them? Right? These are the things at the table conversations, right? Like, have you looked at them? Do you know where to turn it off? Have you called the manufacturer? Ask them, hey, give me a tour of this thing. Show me how this thing works. I know I had a room full of different manufacturers, and they all said, oh, our switch is over here. And the other guy's like, yeah, our switch is not there. Our switch is actually remote in a whole different location. It's like, okay, great. Thanks for not making it consistent, right? So that's a concern for sure. If your car's on fire and it's connected to this system, is the car charged? Is the fire is running up this electrical line into the system, is the car charged? I can't give you the answer, I don't know. But I know that that's the remember talking about the electricity piece? So that's the first concern is, can I secure this, right? It's our typical lockout, tagout concept, but big priority for us, right? And then there's also $1 billion in school buses. And when I saw the $1 billion in school buses, I remember I saw this video and I started thinking, good thing my kids don't take the bus anymore.
Watch from visible smoke to fire. Now you know it's coming, but if you're a kid and you got your Nikes all laced up and you're in the hole, ready to go, are you making it at the back?
The good thing is, I think this was in China, but it might be Korea, but it's their electric buses, right? The good thing that for us here in the United States, we never park our buses next to each other like that, right? Never. Good point. So I talked to one of a firefighter in the Netherlands, and he told me that, because I showed him this video, and he told me the exact same thing had just happened in the Netherlands, and they lost all 13 buses. There were all 13 electric buses in the Netherlands. One started, by the time they got there, you can see that this one's already going. By the time they got there, all 13 were going. It wasn't like they even had a chance to stop the fire.
So let's talk about a little bit about the differences between lithium-ion batteries, right? So they're very toxic atmospheres. A lot of the studies in the literature demonstrate that if you have an electric vehicle versus an internal combustion engine vehicle, they call them ICE now, right? That's like the cool term, ICE. ICE vehicles and BEVs, electric vehicles. A car fire is toxic, right? We all know this, right? Smoke is toxic. It just is. It doesn't matter if it's a lithium-ion battery smoke or a vehicle fire smoke. It's toxic, right? So what they've done is they measured the difference in toxicity between the two. And an electric vehicle, the same manufacturer, and an ICE vehicle have the same type of toxins in them, but twice as much in the battery. So it's safe for us to say that these fires are twice as toxic. House fires are toxic, right? We got the nasty stuff and all the polyurethane materials and all the nasty stuff that's in the house. Those are toxic too. You got the cyclohexanes and all the things that cause cancer. Yes, all of that's still present. It's just think of it in the simplest way. It's twice as toxic. That's the easiest way to describe it.
Not to nerd out too much, but just so we're all on the same page, is that I'm not going to say it's the only things. There's data coming back, but the major players here: carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, hydrogen, hydrofluoric acid, and the PFOAs. Right? The PFOAs, everybody knows, you don't want that stuff going in, it never comes out. Okay, great. The carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide, I really don't care. Like, it doesn't move the ball for me. My two players are hydrogen and oxygen, because we know these things. Hydrogen's the Hindenburg, I don't like that, and oxygen is just a jerk and makes everything get worse. Right? It infuriates everybody. It's like me. Right? So that's a big deal. and you put those two players in the same room, now we have a party, right? Now, those things, okay, firematic-wise, I can deal with those things, and we'll come around to it when we talk about techniques. But the one that's not talked about enough, and this is really seriously, for the older guys in the room, it wasn't a concern for us. But the new guys, this is something that would have changed my mind about my mask policy, either departmentally or personally. I will say I rarely used an SCBA when I was my first 10 years. Like, it wasn't a cool thing to do in New York City. Like, everybody did it without a mask. And so that's what we did. But these masks, these batteries are giving off hydrofluoric acid. And if you don't know what hydrofluoric acid is, people say it goes for the bones. It doesn't really go for the bones. If it's going to be your bones, you're already dead. Because your heart works off a potassium-calcium pump. So it has the lubs and the dubs, and if it eats the calcium, there's just lubs and no dubs. And you stop operating, right? So that's what it goes for. So a little puff of this stuff in small concentrations is enough to put you down. Okay, that's one. But think about your house at night. How many cells are in your house? Okay, so incredibly small amounts, that 1 or 2 breaths is enough to have a problem for you. This is not the same fire department that we had 10 years ago. The addition of these batteries, when you make a move into a house fire, changes the game completely. Like, we are dealing with stuff that 1 or 2 breaths, you might not be coming back to the job kind of thing. It's a totally different game.
How many structure fires that you go on have lithium-ion batteries involved in them? All of them. Every single one. Every time you roll up on a fire in a garage or in the whole house, you have to assume there's going to be lithium-ion batteries present.
I'll say this. Listen, this is like it's topical because it just happened. But the battery thing, it is now the 3rd cause of fires in New York City. The 3rd. Okay, so now this is kind of like the COVID thing. Remember a couple years ago, everybody was dying of COVID? You know, the guy hit the tree at 70 miles an hour. Oh, it's COVID. Everything is COVID, right? But did he have COVID and he hit the tree? Oh, maybe he died of COVID. Right, you get where I'm going with this. Well, I think what's going to happen is the battery thing is, oh, it's a battery fire. Well, did a battery start it, or is it in the area of the fire? So when the data diverges, I have a feeling we're going to get better numbers. But right now, everything's a battery. We haven't really, like, fire investigations haven't figured out how to suss that out. It's going to be a thing that it's going to get better over time, but now everything's a battery. So everybody's hair's on fire about batteries.
And for us in San Diego, our arson investigation team came up with a policy that they only say that lithium-ion batteries were involved to cover their butts, because there's no way you can confidently say this caused it, unless it was on video, on camera, you can see it starting, and that was the cause. And so in San Diego, we don't have fires that started by batteries typically. We have just them being involved in the incident. So for any arson personnel in this room, something to consider. Now, you got this positive feedback loop that happens inside the cell, right? The cell has that chemistry that we talked about. And the positive feedback loop is kind of like you have a chemical reaction, right? And then what happens? It typically increases the temperature, right? And what happens when you increase temperature? You increase the speed of the reaction, which then increases the temperature more, which then increases the speed of the reaction more, and it increases the temperature more, and that's what's called a positive feedback loop. It needs to run its course. Once it starts, it needs to run its course. You do not, nobody here in this room has put out a battery fire.
Right.
You don't put out battery fires. They have to run their course. Now, you can, when we talk about it a little bit later, you can prevent propagation. But once the thermal runaway is occurring on the battery cells, you are not stopping it. There's not the amount of water you can put on that particular cell to stop it, right? You could actually maybe slow it down and delay it and make it be on scene longer, but you're not stopping that chemical reaction. It's going to need to run its course. Even if you were able to put it into liquid nitrogen, maybe it'll stop for a minute until it warms up again, and it'll just start all over again. Right? Because it's already been insulted to the point of where it's going to do a thermal runaway. So, concerns. We talked about oxygen, talked about hydrogen gas, explosive potential, big problem. Just had a structure fire in San Diego where the whole ceiling of the apartment blew up and out. Right? Lady got hurt pretty bad inside. Talked about the chemical reaction, and then reignition. I got to change this slide because 30 days is not even real anymore. There's a story about an incident in the Midwest where they poured cement on lithium-ion batteries that were on fire. They were like, we got to stop this off-gassing. These neighborhoods are real close by. So, brilliant idea. Let's throw cement on it. So they threw cement on it. It worked, but somebody has to clean that up. 8 months later, they were chipping away the cement, found the batteries, and they started going on fire again. After sitting in cement for 8 months.
I know in New York City, our current record is 34 days. So 34 days after insult. And it doesn't even mean that battery's insult. It means they were involved in an incident, and then we left them out in Coney Island in a field because nobody cares about Coney Island. And they just leave them in the field over there, and then 32 days later, the drum explodes. So that's all record right now.
So the difference between thermal runaway and propagation is really important to identify, right? So thermal runaway is that chemical positive feedback loop. Propagation is the domino effect. So propagation is the exposed cells to the thermal damage that this one's going through, then the next ones start to go, right? You start to have that propagation. So how do we stop propagation? Separation, absolutely. Separation is absolutely an option on stopping propagation. How do I do that? I got a row of e-scooters. I'm sure you guys have them here too. A row of e-scooters. For some reason, they put them right in front of the red fire engine section of the sidewalk, and then they catch fire, right? The separation. Get the other scooters out of the way. Boom, right? Nailed it. You stop propagation. Can I stop propagation inside that battery pack? It's difficult.
It's hard.
You can, but it's difficult.
It's designed to keep water out.
And designed for you not to go and tamper with it. So it's not easily. Tell them what you guys were doing with like Halligans and stuff in New York.
Well, that's the natural evolution. It's like, well, if I have to stop the propagation, it's very important. The thermal runaway happens inside a single cell. Once it happens, it's kind of like, thermal runaway happens. We're not involved in it. It's happening. When it goes to tell its two friends, like if you get a third-degree burn on your arm, what's around it? Second-degree burns. And around that first-degree burn. So it tells two friends and goes on. That's propagation. That's where we get involved. So we're like, okay, well, if I got this battery pack that's in this case for an e-bike, I got to get the juice inside there. So let's break it open. So you get, the caveman with his Halligan to start smashing stuff. And, we got blown up. Guys were the guy used a shovel, a metal shovel. It carved an arc into the shovel. I have video of it. If we have time, I'll show you. But we bolted it to his locker to remind him, don't do that. But that's one of those things that's a lesson learned where we don't do that. So we were doing the firefighter smash the thing, but now we are doing it like surgeons, where we take a screwdriver, we remove the screws, and we carefully take it off. We are removing them, but the methodology is very slow, and we have a little toolbox with all those little bits and stuff. It's a much smaller thing.
So you can prevent propagation. The difficult piece is getting access to those batteries and being able to somehow cool the environment of those batteries to the point where they won't propagate to the next one. So how do they get, what do we call insults, right? We talk about insulting, and that's kind of the term in the industry. We call it happens to batteries. So mechanical abuse is one form of insult. That's the easiest one, right? That's the smashing it on the table. That's puncturing it. Don't put a finishing nail through one. We did that. That wasn't good. That wasn't good. It works though, really good. It just goes into thermal runaway right now. Deformation, dropping it, crushing it, all those things, right? So what's the most common way we see this happening? Inside of the back of a trash truck, right? Crushes it, boom, there's your trash truck fire, right? Electrical abuse. Electrical abuse is the most common way that we're seeing the e-bikes worlds catching fire. That's some of the stuff that Bobby talked about. Is it getting the right amount of juice? Are you plugging a dozen strips onto top of strips, and now you're not really getting the full voltage that you should be getting?
And you can see this, you'll see, and it's very uncommon. Tell me if you've seen this. You'll see the contractor that's putting together a deck, and he's driving 66-inch legs in a day, and he has his DeWalt on fire. And it's yeah, you over-discharged it. It's not designed for that. On the other side, when, not you guys, but the first new engine shows up at something with a battery, what are they going to do? What is their technique? They're going to take the batteries and throw them in a bucket and put them underwater, right? Isn't that what that's what 99% are going to do? What are you doing with that battery? You are short-circuiting that battery. So don't be shocked when it starts having a problem. You've done that, but we're doing it in a controlled manner. I encourage, when we get the techniques, I'll tell you how New York City's doing it. And the thing is, we're putting in the bathroom in a tub underwater until we can mitigate it.
So how are you going to be presented with these issues? You're going to be presented with them in 3 ways. The energy storage system, which is going to be like a white container, intermodal container with battery racks in a vertical position, all stacked in there. And you're going to have hundreds of thousands of little cylindrical cells inside these energy storage systems. Or this thing might be mounted on somebody's house, on the wall, right? And that'll be their personal residential energy storage system. You flip this thing down horizontally, you put some wheels on it, and you stack styrofoam on top of it, and you have an e-bike, electric vehicle, right? It's not any different. It's just horizontally on wheels, bouncing up and down on the freeway, going 60 miles an hour, head-on collision. What could possibly go wrong? And then you have the module that gets taken out, becomes a battery for one of these micro-mobility devices, right? So the thing to remember is that these things are basically all the same thing. They're just either different size, different energy storage capability, different stranded energy potential, but they all are the same and they all behave the same.
I'll give you some anecdotal, and this is just good fodder for like where the lines are. The ESSs, they don't have tires. That's how I know what they are. If they don't have tires, they're an ESS. So your battery charger is an ESS. If I put 4 or more tires, that's an electric vehicle. So up to the tractor trailers and that kind of stuff. Once I go 2 or 1 wheels, that's the personal mobility device. Statistically, the place that it's living, and I'm talking like 80% is the personal mobility devices. The reason why is the energy storage system in the electric vehicles had a ton of nerds look at it. Right? They crossed the T's, they dotted the I's, there was a million guys. That's why you're not seeing problems. They also have that whole thing that Rob was just talking about, the BMS. How many cell phone fires have you gone to? Right, that's what I thought. The BMS in this is insane. Do you ever leave this in the car and you come back and like, let me just send a text to my boo, and it's like, nope, too hot. Right? You're like, oh, that's doing BMS thing, man. It's saying it's too hot for that stuff. But the micromobilities, we're buying these things on Amazon for cheap. And that's why all of it's happening here. They have no or shitty BMSs. That's where you're living right now. That's where we're living. I'll tell you that. I'll say solid 80% is in the personal mobility.
So briefly, we'll go over about energy storage systems. So they can be super big. This one's in Australia. You can see that it's, I don't know how many, there's a lot of these.
It's not upside down. You should do that. That'd be funny.
Oh, yeah,
right?
I should do that, huh?
That's a good one.
That's a good point.
The kids still got it.
And this one was one of the things that got lithium-ion batteries in the fire department's world, right?
April 19, 2019.
And then breaking news, just horrible. A massive lithium battery fire in Surprise.
8 firefighters injured. 2 from Peoria helicoptered to the ER that night.
Let me see. Look at that. Alright, I got some guys Neil over here.
Now, a new 78-page report commissioned by APS reveals what happened.
Effectively, what you have is a defect in the battery cell.
Jacob Tetlow is Senior Vice President of Operations at APS. The report revealing the cause, a cascading thermal runaway.
So you kind of think about it as just multiple batteries, in a sense, are so hot that they damage each other and just continue to produce more and more heat.
The investigation finding, 3 hours after the heat started to build, Peoria firefighters opened the door. A spark occurred, and boom, that caused the explosion.
One of the things that's interesting about this, and I'm not an expert on this system, there are definitely experts out there that have been involved in the study of this, but they identified that the inert extinguishing system that was in place worked great. It went, and there was the batteries are not just the batteries, you get the plastics on the outside of the battery, the little box and all, so that stuff was on fire. The inert system went in and put the fire out. When it put the fire out, the fire was mitigating some of the hydrogen gas that was present. So they put the fire out, now you let hydrogen gas build up. So they identified that actually the inert extinguishing system led to a buildup in hydrogen inside that container, which then led to the explosion, which then injured all those guys. They were the HazMat team from Peoria, and if you listen to them, they did everything right. They did everything we would have done. We would have gotten blown up just like they did.
We did 3 episodes on that on the podcast. If you want to take a listen, it's very recent, and it was we broke down that whole report. It was insane.
So energy storage systems, right? Multiple battery racks. When you see these like this, these are your legacy systems. They're the pre-2019 built systems. You have them in your area for sure, and they are not required to be upgraded to the new NFPA 855 standard, which is more like the Tesla Megapack systems that are out there. So walk-in cabinets, walk-in capabilities are still there. Still has a potential for hydrogen. They don't have enunciator panels very much. They have very different types of inert extinguishing systems. They are different sizes, right? And so those are really the ones that if I was talking about energy storage systems that concern me, it's these older ones. The new ones have gone through UL 9540 and 9540 testing, 948A. That's destructive testing. They catch these things on fire. They try to make these things explode. They test these things to the nth degree, monitor the atmosphere all around it, and it has to reach a certain criteria for them to get that UL seal of approval, meaning, yeah, it's safe for you for this to be installed in the neighborhoods, right? So, again, I know we live when these things don't go right, so you're still going to have some issues there, but I'm not super concerned. This fire that you're seeing out the top, this is the Tesla Megapack. You see all these little black dots on top of the Tesla Megapack. Those are pressure vents. And so when the batteries start to release their gas, it increases the volume of air, of gas inside that material, that box. And you have the pressure vents open up. The pressure vents open up. All these toxic gases are lighter than air, right? So hydrogen and HF, they're all coming up and out of that vent. And in that vent around it, they have sparkers, catch fire, and then they burn. So what you're seeing here is a purposeful burn on top of the box. It's not the batteries that are creating this massive fire. It's the box itself, by design, is burning off all the toxic and flammable gases. So that's one of the safety mechanisms on Tesla. This is specifically a Tesla Megapack. Other companies have a bunch of other techniques that they use, but they've invested heavily in meeting the 855 and UL 9540. You said you...
Yeah, the first gen was one thing that New York City rushed right into getting in front of, because it's good PR and everything. But there's no land in New York City, so where do they put them? They put them on the playgrounds, like legit. So they were placing these things. There was one in a playground. There was one next to the what do they call it? A convent. Convent. Yeah, I call it a nunnery. It's where they make the nuns, right? And they right. It was right next to it. These things are not placed right. They're in New York City. Every 40 floors, they're putting a whole floor with just batteries to shave the peaks. And so you're climbing 80 stories, maybe not climbing, but you're taking the elevator up 80 stories. You very well may have a couple of battery banks that you're passing on the way to the fire. That's coming. It's if you have cell phone towers, if you have high rises, you have these things in your district.
Windmills, solar farms, right? So those are there. And I just took a quick look at, in just San Diego County alone, there's only just one company alone is putting 55 installations in the county, and that's just one company, and we've got something like 5 different companies doing that. So it's going to be the same here, right? So it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just something to be aware of. And when these things are coming into your areas, go get a tour. I've talked to these guys. They want the fire department involved in the safety and the development and the walkthroughs. They want you guys to learn how to respond in case there's a failure, right? So they're very welcoming to us. And so take the time, call them, go learn about it. If you see somebody starting to make one of those, just go check it out. It's important. You got to know where to turn it off. Here's some tactical considerations. I'm going to kind of go through this quickly because we're kind of running short on time. But generally speaking, you're going to let these things do what they do on their own. You're going to treat these as the super high voltage junction areas in some of our neighborhoods that are gated off and say do not enter. Technician, no, like right in I don't know if you guys have gotten the training, but we did. Go over there at the fire department and say, "Hey, this is on fire. Don't ever go in here." Right? That's what our gas and electric company says. You don't ever need to go in here ever. Right? It's the same thing here. You don't ever have to engage in an offensive fire operation in these events ever. You can go in there and rescue somebody that had a medical, pull them out and get them away, but you don't have to worry about that. It's going to do its thing, let it do its thing, and then you're going to wait until the technicians that work on that thing show up. It might be 12 hours or 24 hours later, and then they're going to start helping whatever you call it.
Untangle it.
Untangle it. Thank you.
Yeah, for all the incident commanders in here, be very wary of smashing the square peg into the round hole and applying fire techniques to these things. I know they're on fire. I know sometimes they are truly on fire, like a Tesla on fire because of the brakes or the seat catches on fire is a car fire. But if it's the batteries, it's a different game. And so I would just say, pump the brakes and think about it before you do something.
So water application and all those things, I'll go back to this video right here. If you put water on here, you're stopping the box from doing what it wants to do, which is mitigate these toxic gases, right? You put water on this and you put those sparkers out, because you can. Now you just released all the hydrogen and HF that it was burning, right? So the water application has to be, if it's going to be done, it needs to be judiciously. Every one of these companies that make these have their phone number is on the panels of the boxes, and you call them and you say, your thing's on fire. They're going to walk you through everything that they recommend you do on an emergency. The one thing that I would recommend is prioritize evacuations. That would be, if I was the incident commander of an incident, I would consider prioritizing evacuations. I don't really care about the box. Is there smoke and where is it going and who's in the way? And that's what I'm worried about. Everything else, I could care less about a box. Let it blow up or burn down. I don't care, right? We put a ton of water on here. You have a ton of water runoff, right? So if in the Tesla Megapack recommendations, they say do not apply any water at all. Just let it do its thing.
Which, it's kind of a problem for us in the fire because it's an optics thing. Right, so if you go to a car fire, you're going to pull out the line, and you're going to start putting out the fire. Great. Now Tesla's saying don't do it. So engine one's going to pull up, and they're going to stand there and be like, right? And some kid's going to pull out his phone and put it on TikTok or InstaSnap or whatever the hell they do, right? And he's going to be videotaping the fire department going, I pay their salary. Why are they standing around watching a car fire? But the best move is to let it burn. You see how there's like an optics problem? And I think a little public education is going to come into this at some point to say, we're doing the best thing because we're letting it burn. We could do this for 24 hours if you want to do it, but it's not going to help us. 45 minutes later, you're done.
So we're going to move on back to electric vehicles. All right, so I don't have to tell you all, you know that the electric vehicle sales are going through the roof, right? It's in the world, it's expected to be 48% of all the vehicles on the road by 2035. California, that's probably going to be higher because we're leading the way. I went to Norway to do some stuff on electric vehicles, and they had 80% of their vehicle sales last year was electric, right? So they are, because you can basically get a free car in Norway. If you say, I'm going to buy an electric, the government basically pays for your car. They come in different ways. This is the tunnel system for GM. And these are basically a bunch of pouch cell, bunch of laptop batteries all lined up next to each other inside this tunnel that runs along the center section of the vehicle. And then there's the Tesla battery pack. That's all these little cylindrical cells, the 2170s. And they are in like 16 different modules that are separated slightly. And they're by design separated to prevent the propagation of a thermal runaway. So the intent, and they're getting better and better, is to maybe, if you have one module that fails, that's the only thing that fails in the car. And it does this thing and it's done. And they can just replace that module and put a new one on and you're good to go. Right? So they're not there yet, but that's the intent.
Just to keep in perspective, that cell phone charger you have that has one cell, scooters have like 50 to 80 cells. That's about 7,000 cells. All the same, just packed differently.
So electric vehicle damage, right? So here's a vehicle accident that happened. The guts are wide open. So if there's a thermal runaway occurring, you have access to the battery pack. So you could potentially prevent propagation here, right? You put enough water on here, and one of these is going off, maybe not all of them are going to go off, right? So there's an opportunity to go offensive on this type of event. The key to identifying the fire is in the batteries is the white smoke that you see, the battery cell projectiles that are potentially there if the battery pack is compromised, and then hissing and popping sounds. Why is it important for you to identify that on an electric vehicle? Because 60% of all electric vehicle fires do not involve the battery. The batteries are actually really difficult to catch on fire. The folks that are doing studies on electric vehicle fires try to catch these things on fire, and they have a super hard time. They literally put a heptane fuel fire underneath the vehicle, and they can't get the batteries to go. It's really difficult to get the batteries to go.
I know the Tesla is rated to take a screwdriver at highway speeds into the battery compartment and not puncture. So if you think you're going to throw some water in there, you're going to be saving the day, get back to the Super Bowl, that's not happening. It's designed to not let that happen.
So the key is, so these fires is attack them like every other fire anytime you ever would. You show up, the car's on fire, you put it out. Soon as you identify, or your firefighter identifies, it's in the batteries, right? Because I can't put it out. It keeps reigniting. I'm seeing popping and hissing sounds. Tactical pause. time to make a decision. Do we continue to engage or do we just back off, right? And that's going to be super situational, right? It's going to be all kinds of different reasons why you're going to go one direction or the other. Offensive considerations. There are some batteries that you may have some success accessing some void spaces. The GM battery is one of them that they said that there's a couple of areas near the wheel well. Sometimes you can have access to the battery compartment and you can flood the battery compartment, which can then be an option to prevent propagation and stabilizing the incident. You'll hear me say stabilizing or mitigating the incident. You'll never hear me say you're putting the fire out, because you can't put the fire out. All you're doing is stabilizing the incident to hopefully move the problem to a safer location, right? The rekindle can occur days or weeks. I know here in Sacramento they had one that caught fire 3 weeks after the accident, right? It's a pretty famous incident. These things are completely unpredictable. There's no way to know when they're going to go again. So just understanding that and having the foresight to be able to tell the tow companies and the second responders and all those people, hey, we're dealing with a battery pack that has been insulted. So it's an unstable situation. So do whatever you do on your end to make sure you're safe and the proper precautions have been taken. The 3 keys to success in an electric vehicle fire is 1, identifying that the batteries are actually involved. Confirming the batteries are involved. Because they're not, you can just put the fire out and you're done. Let it burn and protect exposures if possible. It's faster to let it burn than it is to try to cool the batteries down. Currently with the process, the tools that we have, hose and water, it's faster to let it just burn. Also, if you let it just burn to completion, you're allowing that positive feedback loop to go to completion. Okay, now it's done, meaning it's not going to do it again 3 weeks later, right? The other aspect, a couple other things that I think are important to consider. If you're going offensive on an electric vehicle fire, you are purposely exposing your firefighters to that smoke. So you have to have a reason for why you would do that. And I'm sure we think of 1,000 reasons why I would want to go offensive on one of these, right? Yeah, we signed up to do a dirty job and a dangerous job. Go do it. If we have to do it because we're protecting other property in life, then yes, we're going to do it all day long, right? But if we're not doing that, we're not protecting property or life, then why are we exposing our personnel? Because now the only life hazard that's present is you, right? So just think about that option. And then the last piece is, if the vehicle is on fire, it's consuming the explosive and toxic gases. You put it out, you're letting those gases out. Those are all things to consider. I can't give you the answer for every single time, right? Those are the things that you have to process as you're making those decisions. And securing a water supply is always going to be a good idea, because you may have to engage either in an exposure protection or you may have to engage offensively, and that's going to take thousands of gallons of water.
Well, just put it in perspective, like Tesla now, if you read, has anybody read Tesla's EV book? It's like only like 10 pages. It's great for us. It's like short attention span. But it's like, they say in there, it's like, if you're going against the Tesla fire with water, it's like 24 to 36 hours of water dumping between 20 and 35,000 gallons. So you can do that, or you can just wait 45 minutes and let it burn. Now, if you're on overtime, then I can see the answer, but I get it.
So one of the things that I did is I reached out to our CHP partners in San Diego, and I went to their training locations, and I told them, this is what we're doing. So don't yell at us when we're blocking the lane, because if you tell us to try to put it out, we're going to block the lane for longer. And then they were like, okay, yeah, you guys do whatever you do. They had no issues with it, right? But I think it's important to have that conversation with your partners, because other people are going to be involved. And so it's good that they're in on the secret, right? It's good that they bought off on this process before you showed up. This is, again, I'm going to give you guys this PowerPoint, so you're going to have these tactical considerations. A couple of things to think about, cutting and puncturing the battery is, it says never, because you have to have the right tool to do it. And if you don't have the right tool, then we don't want to do it. We're going to observe the battery. Once you extinguish the fire, right? Extinguish the fire, and you think it's done, you have to stay on scene for a minimum of 45 minutes. Our SOPs say 60. Because I know what firefighters do, and they're going to shave minutes anyways. So I tell them 60, and I'm hoping they're staying for 45. Right? So, but the industry says 45 minutes, because in 45 minutes, if it hasn't gone into thermal runaway again, then they say it's safe to tow. You can put it on the back of a flatbed. Has to be a flatbed, or at least it's got to have dollies on the rear wheels, because if you're spinning the rear wheels, you're producing power to the batteries. You're going to have a whole problem, right? So it has to be a flatbed, and you can safely move it. Some departments are sending an engine company with the flatbed. We don't do that, but that depends on your jurisdiction. It depends on where the yards are. It depends on how many engines you have, right? For us, I mean, you're really kind of like 7 minutes away from the next engine company. So we just say, no, if it catches fire, just call the next engine company, right? So for us, that's what we do. But if some jurisdictions, you might need to drive 15, 20 minutes before you're in the other person's jurisdiction, right? So I'm not going to tell you how to do that. Just, it's an option if you have the staffing to do it. And then the big thing is to tell the tow company, store it 50 feet away from all exposures. I called all our tow companies, and they all said, yes, we are aware of this requirement. They also said, we don't know where we're going to do that. So in Escondido, we had a fire, electric vehicle fire, and we had to use their public works yard to store the vehicle because there was no yard that had enough room for the 50-foot clearance.
Yeah, what a crazy situation. This family just moved into their house days ago. Now, here you see their garage door that was blown off, and over here, these are parts of the Jeep that are now totaled from the explosion in here.
Basically, my bedroom's up here. This is where I was sleeping.
Carmelo Maggio walks us through the shocking awakening he had Tuesday morning before class. Smoke alarms going off. His mom bursts into his room telling him to get the pets and get out.
And I look, I see some smoke, and then I see it's coming from the garage, and I get super worried because my Jeep was in there.
Firefighters rush to the garage. Maggio gets out right in time to see what happens next.
So I'm over there on the street, and I watch a big, big boom, and this garage door exploded, went mid-air, almost hit a firefighter. It was like something you'd see out of a movie, a massive explosion, and I've just never seen anything like that, because we didn't see any real visible flames. We just saw a bunch of gas and smoke.
That vault.
This is pretty much what happened. This is FSRI's video of recreating a energy storage system fire in a garage. So that's what happens. We were in San Francisco teaching a class, and they told us they had just had the same thing happen to them, where it blew out the garage and actually blew out the windows of the house across the street. So,
I have a white paper that says that the pressure generated is over 1,500 psi. That's a lot of hooch. That's a lot.
So when I saw that, it brought me to start thinking about some considerations, right? Garage. It changes how we fight fire in garages. Are we approaching the garage directly now? Or should we maybe consider coming at it from an angle, right? Maybe I approach the garage. If I don't see any fire, I'm more worried. If I see smoke and I don't see fire, I'm more worried, right? If I see fire, I'm like, oh, okay, well, it's probably not explosive anymore, right? Because the fire consumed it. But I have to be careful as I approach those garage doors, right? Warehouses, roll-up doors. What's behind the warehouse? What's inside the warehouse? What's being manufactured there? Do you know? Most of the time we don't know. Are you going to bury your rescue saw into a metal roll-up door with the potential of tons of hydrogen gas behind that? Like I said, I don't have all the answers. What I like to do is make you guys all have questions later after the class. And so that's one of them. Like, have that conversation. What does that look like? Can we investigate? Can we take a look? Maybe somebody can get into the business, or maybe dispatch can get a little more information on what the business does. I don't know, but you have to be careful. These e-bikes are being, I don't know if you've ever seen them, but we actually saw one. There's these U-Haul essentially type trucks that have 60 battery packs, charging capability. They go around to all the e-bikes and they grab the dead batteries, put it in the U-Haul, and then put the fresh battery in that rental bike, right? And now they're good. So that's their job. They go around, they get all the old ones, and they charge it. Where's the U-Haul go? Into a warehouse where there's 60 other U-Hauls doing the exact same thing throughout the city. What if that's on fire? And then you show up to that roll-up door. Right, so got to think about it. I don't really, like I said, I don't have the answers for it, but something to think about. Underground parking, huge concern, right? Our parking structures are no longer parking structures. They're refueling stations that are not permitted to be refueling stations and have had no change in the infrastructure, the number of sprinkler heads, the ventilation systems. Nothing's been changed. All they did is put recharging stations underground, right? And so there's a concern there. What's the plan? What's the plan, right? So it's life property, right? Life is the number one thing. We have to go down there. You're probably not even going to know it's an electric vehicle on fire when you see smoke coming out of an underground parking garage. You're just going to know something's on fire, right? You have to go down there to see if there's anybody trapped. You have to, right? But once you decide and realize there's no more life hazard, then that goes back to the question that I asked. Is it worth it for you to be in there as a life hazard dealing with an electric vehicle fire underground? If the sprinklers are on and it's keeping it from spreading to all the other cars, which studies have shown that sprinklers do prevent propagation of vehicles, might be better to just pull back. Let it do its thing, right? And then enter when that atmosphere becomes safer. Something to consider. But there are a bunch of other ideas out there on moving vehicles on dollies, putting blankets on the vehicle, and then moving the vehicle out with a pickup truck. There's a lot of great ideas, and anybody who tries any of that stuff and is successful, please shoot me an email, especially with videos or pictures, because I would love to learn from you on the things that you've done that have been successful. Yeah, that covers what I said. Get your phones out and snap this QR code. So if you didn't get it, this is off of the NFPA website. You just have to travel like through the wormhole to get to the actual link for this. And what it is, it's this. Right? It's the ERG. Of course, they had to call it ERG, right? And make it orange, right? So they get us completely confused. Hey, pull out the ERG. Okay, I'm looking at it. I'm on the yellow pages. No, not that ERG, the other one, right? So this is the ERG. It's the Emergency Response Guide. It gives you pictures of all different vehicles that are manufactured. The NFPA has done a pretty good job of keeping up. There's a couple of apps out there that look really good at being able to access this information. I don't work for any apps. I don't build any apps, so I'm not going to say what app. Just you can search it. But my concerns with the apps, I've also seen the apps all of a sudden disappear. You know, like this app used to be awesome. Now I can't get in it because the company failed or whatever. So the NFPA is going to maintain this information. It gives you places of where you can push, lift. It tells you where the pretensioners are. It tells you where the high voltage systems are, right? Lithium-ion 400 volt system. It tells you about the 12 volt system, where that's located. So it's like 5-6 pages of things, and it gives you some recommendations on how to address a fire or other issues, extrication, things like that. So it's a great resource. I think all of us should have it on our iPads or laptops or cell phones at work. When you're on an incident and you're fighting the fire, hopefully somebody thinks about clicking and saying, hey, what kind of car is that? Oh, I think it's a Nissan Leaf. Okay, let me click on that, pull it up, right, get some further information. Understanding that if you're dealing with an electric vehicle fire, you're going to be there for hours anyways. You've got time to pull this up, right? One thing that I note, the GM says, do not cut or disable the 12 volt system. Who was taught to cut and disable the 12 volt system in the extrication classes? Right? They say not to because it runs their battery management system. So basically all bets are off, right? As soon as you cut that, now he's like, oh, the computer's like, not my fault if it catches fire. You just turned me off. Right? So that's why they say you can do it, but just be cognizant of what you need to do. And I think a lot of the extrication classes now are saying do everything you can before you cut it, like move the vehicles, lift the steering wheels, move the chairs back, like do all the stuff that the power system can help you with on an extrication, right? And then cut the 12 volts to disable the airbags. Anyway, so just something to consider. And don't forget that electric vehicles don't just come in sedan sizes, right? This is in Paris.
Somebody's birthday.
Yeah. So one of these guys is going to do the propagation piece here real soon. That guy. Yeah. Move the other bus, right? That's a good idea. So this is Paris. This is a large metropolitan city. I don't see a single firefighter here yet. So that means it's probably less than 5 minutes. The entire bus is consumed. Yeah, you hear him coming, right? So what's the plan? Are we letting this one burn? Right? I mean, there's a lot of exposures, right? So my plan, try to put this fire out. Put out all the things that are normally consumable, tires, seats, fabric, like go do that. We can do that. Just leave the batteries to do their thing. But keep everything else from catching fire, right? Because a lot of that smoke and heat is coming from the seats and the tires. And we could do something about that, right? There's no reason why we can't compartmentalize the incident and actually manage what we can manage and then let the other thing do its thing and then protect exposures, right? So that would be how I would personally address that incident. But I definitely would go in there heavy on the initial knockdown and reduction of that heat and smoke. Lastly, but definitely not least, the micromobility pain in the butt incident. Anybody know how many times you guys are going on micromobility type fires, little battery fires in residences approximately per, say per week or per month? What's that? Weekly. Yep. We're doing 3 a week in San Diego. 3 incidents involving batteries that require us to go manage that in some way or another. Now, sometimes it's a DeWalt battery that just melts on the, some guy's garage. Sometimes it's a full structure fire. Sometimes it's a vehicle fire. But we're definitely seeing quite a few. And you guys are seeing even more.
I think they're like 5 to 10 a day right now. It's getting to the point where HazMat 1, the only HazMat company in the city, can't support it. So they're training engines and being battery support units. It's crazy.
One of the concerns here is obviously everybody parks it right where they come in and out, right? So that's one of the big concerns is that people are getting trapped. They can't get out of their houses because the bike is on the way.
You see him, he's in his tighty whities. Like, whoop.
Look at the color of that flame. So that's the lithium, right? Lithium salts that are burning in there. I'll show you another video that you can see it even better. This is how the fire spreads, right? Our arson investigator said that they found an e-cigarette fire that he could have sworn there's no way the e-cigarette from the kitchen that was being charged launched the battery 30 feet across the hallway onto a couch and caught the couch on fire. He didn't believe it until he came onto my task force and we started talking about lithium-ion batteries, and he's like, okay, I believe it now, right? But yeah, absolutely, right? So the kids are storing this stuff. It's definitely an issue. This is just a few examples. I like to bring some of these up because sometimes we don't think about, right? We don't think about the
jazzies.
Yeah, exactly, right? You don't think about those things that, even like those things and all that. How do we access the battery? How do we get the battery out? There's all different ways to do it.
So you started?
Yeah.
Great. So, this is the shortened version. You see that in the bottom left? Now look at the top right. Now look at the bottom right. So FDNY and UL did some testing that when they build a house, they built 4 houses to spec. Molding, insulation, outlet covers, everything. Carpets, the whole thing. They bought 4 of them. So we did this test, and it went from starting, 52 seconds later it went off. That's the first time you can see a visual indicator of smoke, right? And then within a few seconds, it blew the windows out. Massive overpressurization of the compartment. Here's the scary part, is that all these houses had working, installed smoke detectors, and all 4 houses, the smoke detectors were failed before they got a chance to alarm. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. That's some scary shit there, right? So that's as a parent, you got the e-bike downstairs and the kids are charging it. As soon as you hear that, I expect the guys going, get that shit out of the house, like right now. Like my kid's not allowed to get it anywhere within the house, anywhere near the house, because that's real.
This illustration shows us what it's like when a lithium-ion battery fails and sparks fire, often because of faulty design or overcharging those batteries.
So that's it, right? And we just had a fire like this up in North Park in San Diego. Exactly like this. Blew up and out. Told you the ceilings were all blown up. Lady got blown out. She had to be rescued out of the bathroom window or something like that by a neighbor. So look at the color of the fire first. That's the first thing I thought. That was weird. And then the next thing you think about is like these guys were first in like 3 minutes, right? The window's blown out. Doors blown open. Again, the color is like, what are we dealing with right now? And then you're going to see some batteries go flying up and out in just a little bit. Keep watching the section right there. See that? There was one. Another one. right? That's what you're dealing with. And that's just one e-scooter. So people always say, well, okay, how many GPMs do I need to put on this thing to put it out? I call this full GPM. This is like as full as it can get, right?
You'll see them popping off underwater. So remember, they don't need air. They bring their air. They make their air.
And then the gases that are coming out are not all clean gases, right? There's some toxic gases. One of the good things to think about, though, it is that the HF is water soluble, right? And so I'll circle back on an electric vehicle thing that I forgot to mention after this video. So let's just do a quick circle back because I forgot to mention this. Electric vehicle extrication. What's the plan? How many of you wear an SCBA while you're extricating on a vehicle? Nobody does, right? That's not even a PPE requirement, right? Sometimes our rescue guys are not even in turnouts, right? So, okay, cool, we're doing an extrication. Truck guys show up, they're doing an extrication, and they're starting to cut, right? And you're starting to push. And let's do a dash push. Okay, do a dash push. I'm going to put the ram right on top of the battery pack. I'm going to push, and it's going to go awesome, right? And all of a sudden, pop, hiss, fizz, right? I start seeing white smoke, and it's hissing, and now what? Now what's the plan? Get their pack is a good idea, right? But I'm thinking I've got a mom and a little kid, and they're stuck, and they're trapped, and I got to get them out, right? So this is the kind of stuff I was trying to tell you about. Get that kitchen conversation going, because if you're not thinking about it then, you're not going to think about it. At that moment, you're going to be like, I don't know. Right? So here's my suggestion, right? Engine guy on the extrication, sorry you got the short end of the stick. You're going to be suited up with SCBA at the ready with a hose line. You're supposed to have a hose line down, right? We always have a hose line down during extrications, right? Charged? Always. So down, charged, with a person on it manning that nozzle, standing directly behind the extricators. Pop, hiss, fizz happens, hey, you guys are getting wet. But keep working, right? Because I'm going to knock down those, I'm going to use hydraulic ventilation, pop all the windows, make sure that I can hydraulically ventilate. I'm going to hydraulically ventilate that compartment, and I'm hopefully going to knock down some of the HF and allow you guys to continue to do work. Now, if you think it's going to take longer than a few minutes, and now this fire is starting to grow, switch. I'm in, you're out, I'm masking up, and I'm starting to go to work, and now I'm SCBA'd up, continue to pull the folks out, right? Like that's my thought. You guys can come up with some people talk about bringing a ventilation component to it and start ventilating that system with like a fan. Whatever works for you. But I can tell you one thing, if your engine companies and your truck companies are not talking about that plan, it's not going to happen in that moment, right? It needs to be talked about ahead of time. What floor? The top floor. So they already heard it, right? And they heard it pop. Oh boy. Door open, hit the floor. What happens when a smoke detector detects fire inside an elevator shaft? It goes all the way to the first floor and does not allow you to stop anywhere in between. So he got lucky. He hit the button before the smoke detector and he was able to get out.
I got a couple add-ons, if we have time.
Yeah. This is why we see lots of, injured citizens trying to put fires out. This is a good one to show you how much gas actually comes out of these things. This is just a scooter with 48 little 18650s in them. And like my previous mental slide would have told me that like this, maybe a little bit further back would be good enough to just let it do its thing.
Hear that little...
Look at that volume.
Because remember, it's one cell telling the 9 friends around it that are telling the 27 friends around it. So it goes hockey stick fast.
Now you can see that the smoke is actually dissipating once the fire started, right? Because that fire is starting to consume some of that. I think we all know what he's saying, right? Wanted to point out farming. I don't know if you got any farmers in the room, but I know that even in San Diego Fire, we have a couple guys that are farming. Basically go around, they pick up batteries, e-bikes, and they bring them home and they charge them at home and then they put them back out the next day.
Yeah.
And they get paid to do it. And so these guys are doing it mid-rise apartments, 5 third-story, 4th-story, 5-story, 10-story, 16 stories, 20 stories, right?
Like you'll go to like a house fire that looks like it's gas fed. I mean, it's like, like magnesium's on fire. It's like a square. It's like coming up square, right? And you're like, what the hell? Well, the kid, he goes around all night long because they don't magically recharge themselves. Somebody does that. So at night, the kid swaps out batteries all night and puts it in his Toyota Corolla, right? And he drives home at 9 in the morning and he puts it on the Clark Griswold infrastructure in his house, right? And he goes to sleep. And so when 400 batteries go off in a private dwelling, it doesn't act like a regular wood-framed fire. It acts like an inferno. It's sick. This is the fire that I was telling you about. These kids slid this yellow pole. 7 stories, 4 fatalities in this one.
You can see the window is blown out of its hinges.
If you watch quickly as well, you'll see flashes behind them. That wasn't a gun deal that went bad or paparazzi. That was batteries popping after him. I was at this one. This is an e-bike store. Just for the record, it's 3 in the morning and there's no reason for that horn. It's a little embarrassing. I'm just saying. No reason for that. Yeah, he was really, go get him, brother. Watch this. Watch the smoke. Pop. The dog knew what was going on. It's already happening. Then he forgets the kid. I don't care how good you are. Even if you're on the A team, that's impressive.
So wearing my Chiefs hat in the room now, you shall wear your SCBA during overhaul, right? So I know not everybody does it. I get it. If we're on fire with me, you are. Right? And that culture has got to shift if we're not doing it because of all the stuff that was just demonstrated.
These walls are displaced. It's like a bug bomb. You ever go to one of those things where the bug bomb blows up in an apartment? They use the bug bomb and it's like, this is good for like 20,000 square feet. And then they're in a 500 square foot studio, so they use 10 of them, right? And they blow the walls out. These batteries do that, like this.
The things for us is to think about when you're structure fire, you're going to go fight the fire, you're going to do what you do. The issue is post-fire. Removing all those batteries out of there, the e-bikes, right? One of the considerations to be concerned about, you go in through the front door, you pass an e-bike, it's not on fire because you're going to fight the kitchen fire. Well, what if that thing decides to go behind you? Right? So don't pass it. Hey, get this thing out of here, right? Before you keep going because you don't want that fire coming up behind you, right? And so you put the fire out, you take some of the big batteries out. As soon as you knock down the bulk of the fire, what's usually the very next thing we do? check for extension, right? Checking for extension. Before you check for extension now, you have to go, are there any batteries? You got to do a primary for batteries. Because if you don't, you're going to throw all that overhaul stuff on top of it. And you're going to eventually forget a battery behind, and it's going to cause you to have to come back later when it rekindles. Right? So take the extra second, look for batteries. If you have batteries and you still have some active fire, you can use your hose stream to just hose those batteries out of your way into an area that you're going to deal with later, continue fighting the fire. One truck company needs to be assigned to come in and help remove those batteries, right? You're not going to use them with gloves. You're not going to put them in your turnout pocket.
Use a shovel.
Right? We can use a shovel.
Seriously. Don't. And as silly as it sounds, use a metal shovel. It holds a much higher temperature. We're using the plastic ones, and it just melts right through the shovel.
So you're going to shovel it out, put it outside. Hopefully you're on the first floor. If you're on the second floor, you probably can still just throw them outside. When you're on the third floor, you start having to think about putting them in buckets and lowering the batteries down, right? And then when you're on the 15th floor, now you're talking about bathtubs and sinks, flooding those things with water, and then holding that for a later time when the HazMat team can come in and help mitigate those problems. One of the things to consider, though, is you throw those batteries in a bathtub in a small bathroom, you're creating hydrogen gas.
Yeah, I was going to.
Now you need to dedicate some kind of hose line for ventilation. Open that little window in the bathroom, and every once in a while just hit it with the fog and get that hydrogen out of there, right? How many extra steps is that from things that we don't currently do, right? That we're going to have to do. We're going to have to end up doing that.
Our current thing, and I was alluding to this before, is that, first new engine, they take the batteries and they throw it into the bathtub. They flood the bathtub. It's awesome. It works in a private dwelling. Like, what are you going to do? How are you going to get those batteries out? Throw them out the window or put them in a bucket or something like that. Not a big deal. It's an easy move. But now do that in the 70th floor. I'll lower it out the window. Do you have 700 feet of rope? I don't have that in my pocket. So that's not a viable thing. And so, okay, now I'm creating in a limited combustible room, the bathroom, a small space, accumulating, and I know this is happening, hydrogen and oxygen in a small space. So, okay, no problem. We're going to take glass, put a fog line, and we're going to vent this place constantly. So now the engine company's all pissed off because he's out of the game because he's got to vent this room. But that's the game now. If you're on the bathroom, well, then you're fogging out that window to keep the constant air flowing out. And we're biding our time to take those batteries down, which enters problem 2. Now we have to take the batteries downstairs, and we're in a 70-story building. So we put them in, let's say, a drum. Do you put them underwater? I would say, yeah, you're going to put them underwater. Has anybody ever lifted a drum full of water? Unless you're Conan the fireman, you're not doing that, right? And if you do, let's say you do that, you give that an old bear hug and you're walking it down, where is the chimney? Right under your chin. That's not a smart move. So now we're like, okay, what are we going to do? And I'm not joking, this is actually in the New York City books, and it's been there for 150 years, is if we have a mattress fire on an upper floor, they put it in the elevator with the probie, turtled up, with a 2.5-gallon water can, and he rides the elevator with him. I swear, that's a true story, right? So they'll put out the fire real quick, and then when they get to the lobby, they pull it out. So the chief's like, well, that'll work. But we're not dealing, this is not a mattress. We're talking about jet engines. These things, just to put it in perspective, these things burn at anywhere from 1,200 to 1,500 Fahrenheit. Steel gets soft at about $1,000. At about 1,400, it turns to liquid. Not just soft, I'm talking actual liquefy. So if you have, and plus that overpressurization. So now, okay, let's put the thing into the elevator, right? We'll remove fireman service and recall. Right? That makes sense. Now we don't have anybody in, but I know the elevators will drop down. You're the incident commander. Are you comfortable blowing an elevator out of a building? Crap, that doesn't work either. So what I'm saying is we don't really have a plan. Some incident commander's like, I'll take the risk. Or the other guy's like, well, we'll carry it down 70 stories. If you got 20 young bucks, yeah, they'll bring it down. I mean, a couple guys are going to blow out the O-ring or whatever the hell is going to happen. But, that's not an easy lift. That's not an easy lift. Somebody's going to get medically hurt. And so incident commanders have to weigh that out to see where it goes. There is no real plan right now. The real plan is they're putting it in a bathtub underwater. You can't make a landing zone and just throw them out the window? At 70 floors, I've seen windows come out and run the building and then go like this, and they go horizontal and take trees. Like, I don't have a plan for you. I'm saying at 70 stories, things are different up there. Very different. You know, so like, if you live in the land of 6 floors and below, you're gonna have probably an easy one. But if you're looking for an all-in-one play, there is no play. We're building that plane as we fly it.
How about where else are we seeing these, right? And I kind of hinted at it before, but we're seeing them here. And whether you know it or not, we've been doing this actually for a lot of years. How many people have been on a recycling facility fire? Those are awesome, right? Like 12, 24 hours, all day, all night, lobbing water into freaking trash, right? 60% of them, actually 40% of them were lithium-ion batteries, but 15% of them are batteries, and then 10% of them are batteries, and then 15% of them are unknown, which are probably batteries, right? Like, only other thing that's there is propane cylinders 20% of the time, right? So, yeah, this is the cause of your nightmare. And then in trash trucks, 60% of the trash truck load fires that you would go on are lithium-ion batteries. We literally had 2 last month that we were able to pull the batteries out of the trash truck. City of San Diego estimates we lost $2 million worth of trash trucks last year. That was last year. This is way getting worse. Way getting worse, right? So then the issue here is you go to that structure fire with that DeWalt drill, and it's melted, and it's next to the other one that was charging on the little counter, right? And you show up and there's no more fire. Right now, what do you do with that incident as an engine company captain? You remove the batteries from the garage? I would say what I used to do, I'd be like, fire's out. See you later. Call us if you need us. That's what typically happens, right? What does that homeowner do with those batteries? Yeah, I got a trash can out, it's blue in San Diego, it says recycle. I'm recycling them, right? So put it in the recycle. Yeah, it could burn the trash can. It can burn. What will end up happening is it's going to, at some point in that lifespan, you're going to encounter it again on an incident, right? Or somebody in another jurisdiction.
I got a video on that.
You're going to go to a recycling fire, and it's going to be somebody who threw that away. So the issue that we have here that we don't have an answer for is, what does the homeowner do with those batteries? Because we can't just say, sir, you're got a bad luck, and good luck with this. Here's this number that you can call. There's this website called calltorecycle.org, which there is, and you can call them, which I did. And after going down the rabbit hole of telling them I've got burnt batteries, what do I do with them? They finally gave me one phone number to call. I called that guy, and he says, yeah, we'll take it for $140. So first of all, nobody's going down the rabbit hole of phone calls, right? If I don't get the answer within one phone call, I'm done, right? Even making the phone call is actually pretty impressive, right? Second, you're going to tell me I have to pay $140 for a $30 battery? It's going in the trash, right? So that's a big problem. I mean, $2 million a year and rising in costs of lost trash trucks, plus recycling fires, plus the hazard of dumping all that trash into a neighborhood because your trash truck's on fire. And of course, the trash truck is CNG powered. So what could possibly go wrong there? Right? So we don't have an answer for that. I don't have an answer for that. So I can tell you what I guess we do kind of have a partial answer for that. What I do in San Diego is we put the batteries in saltwater brine solution, 20% salt water. That de-energizes the batteries, and it makes the batteries essentially not capable of blowing up during the transportation to a recycling facility. So we put them in salt water, and we leave it at the residence. And we tell them, we'll come back. Don't touch it, don't mess with it. This is off-gassing hydrogen. So we leave it there with the lid slightly open for ventilation. And then our environmental health folks come back the next day. And they check the bucket. And if the bucket is not producing a flammable gas anymore, they basically take the batteries out and say, sir, you can dispose of the batteries. Go to your household hazardous waste and just give them this. They'll take it. And we take the water. And we've sent that water sample to the labs now 3 times. And every time these come back as non-haz. It can be sewered. The pH is around 10 or 11 of the water. And the amount of material, it's not clean water. There is definitely contamination in the water, but the amount of contamination in those waters is low enough where we can sewer the water. That's the environmental health folks that do that stuff, not me. I'm just telling you what we do. There is a caveat to that. When you have enough batteries in a bucket of water, that water becomes flammable. And now we had this issue just happened like literally 2 weeks ago, and I had to spend $2,500 in disposing 2 55-gallon drums considered flammable liquid, which was just water, salt water. But it was giving off over 10% LEL the entire time after 6 weeks of off-gassing. So yeah, like I said, there's no subject matter experts. We're building the plane while we fly it. I literally had to pay, the city took that hit for that incident. It was at a residence, but there were so many batteries that we couldn't safely leave it there. So we said, yeah, we'll take it. We'll take this one, right? Because they don't happen that often. But that's what we're doing. So we're not leaving the homeowner completely without an option. We're not leaving the batteries back. We tell them, look, we'll come back and help you through this process. And that's what we're doing. Now, that's because we're having 1 or 2 of these a week. If we start having 5 of these a day, I don't think that process is going to be sustainable.
Our time is up. I have like 3 short videos. I promise under 5 minutes. You want to see them? They're worth it, I promise you. So this is our caveman hitting it with a shovel. And he's still going. He's like, yeah, I'm going to do this, man. That's stranded energy. That's from one scooter battery. That's one battery. Remember how I was telling you guys about hitting it with a hammer? This is in a warehouse. Just to put in a, I'm sorry, this is a shopping, like a food shopping store. This food shopping store is in the Bronx. It's 1 city block. So it's basically a 1/4 mile by a 1/2 mile, okay? That bike was involved in that hammer. 30 minutes later is this. This is a New York City 5th alarm. To put it in perspective, our first alarm is 80 guys. Every alarm after that is about 50 guys on top. So this is 500 guys to handle this. This is from one e-bike store, fire. This is the left one. That's the busiest commuter railroad in the United States, the Long Island Railroad. That is by my wife. That is an e-bike that is plugged into the train. The train doesn't have a normal outlet, but the people that work on the train have the normal outlet. So what you do is you walk down the trestle and you grab the guy's thing and go clip, and now you have the outlet. And they convert it, and now you can charge your e-bike while you're commuting to work. The one on the right is bicycle locked to a subway pole, and then he added on an extra battery for more mileage out of that. So if you come in there knowing the speed of this operation and that thing goes, how fast do they have to evacuate a subway car that is mobbed? Okay? Problems that we see. This is San Francisco. That is a battery charging in the back of that e-bike store that gave me all those cells. That's the, you guys like, you're not going to get me in trouble. I'm like, no, that's real. That's strip on strip on strip on strip. Those things are not getting charged at the right rate. Oh. Recycling plants is really short.
Whoa.
Almost went down his pants. They call it a hot toddy. Dog toys. Blew off half the dog's face. All right, now you guys, I said that dad forgot the kid, and you're all like, ha, ha, ha. This upset you. All right, I got you, I'm tracking. This is our first test of the batteries. We didn't think we need them in a cage. This is 9 cells. One of them went on top of a burn building at our training facility, and it almost started a fire. We had to stretch lines. So that's how they really look when they're not in a case. Energetic? Absolutely. They're exciting to see when we do these things. Like so it's a big deal. I hope we left you guys with more questions than you came in here with. If not, we didn't do our job. Thanks for everybody for coming.
Like and subscribe so we can continue to help HazMat teams and first responders every day. See you on scene with HazMat Roadshow TV.